When Governor Wolf took office in 2015, he made a commitment to invest in education in the Commonwealth. During his 2 terms in office, the governor and his administration have made strides towards fulfilling this commitment. Today, we're joined by Acting Secretary of Education Eric Hagarty to take a look back at the past 8 years. Eric, thank you for taking the time. Appreciate seeing you.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Let's jump right into it. There are, I'll say, weeks left in the administration, and I want you to give us a sense of kind of an overview of some of the key achievements of the last 8 years of the Wolf administration.
Yeah, well, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. We are in the middle of a transition into Governor-elect Shapiro's administration, and of course are focused on ensuring a smooth transition. But we've of course been reflecting on the last 8 years, and I think it's almost hard to remember that when Governor Wolf took office, there had been staggering cuts in education funding under the prior administration. Nearly 20,000 teachers had been laid off, and our K-12 system was really unstable, and the Commonwealth's finances were unstable. We came into office with only $250,000 in the rainy day fund, which keeps government lights on for about 10 minutes, I understand, and $2 to $3 billion in a structural deficit. So to be sitting here with you 8 years later, knowing that we've invested an additional $4 billion into our education system, and the Commonwealth's got $5 billion in the rainy day fund and billions of dollars in surplus. I think Governor Wolf's the first governor in modern history to turn over a budget surplus to his successor. So really proud that I think despite a global pandemic that no one saw coming, there's no question that the education system is in a better place than when Governor Wolf found it.
So let's talk just for a second more. You mentioned funding. Obviously, I know from past conversations with you and with others, a huge point of pride for the administration as they leave. The single largest one-year increase in education funding, I think that anybody can recall.
Yeah.
How's that possible? How did it finally happen?
Well, I think a few things. First, nothing happens overnight in democracy, and it takes years of pushing, and we're thrilled that, as he mentioned, this year's budget, nearly $2 billion in increases to education funding, $850 million for the K-12 system through basic education funding, $100 million in special ed funding, $225 million in level up funding. Just tremendously proud of this, and I think it's a credit to the persistence of Governor Wolf and growing recognition that whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you want your schools to succeed, and without the resources they need, it's really hard to do that. And I just, again, tremendously proud of those accomplishments over the last year.
Let's stay on funding just for a second longer if I can. I don't want to just talk about money, but obviously that's an important part of public education. We talk about the fair funding formula, the level up program, 2 of the efforts over the last 8 years to make sure that high quality education was available to every student. Yeah. Have you seen these pay dividends already? What have you seen in terms of impact from those programs?
Yeah, exactly. Before Governor Wolf took office, there was no fair funding formula. K-12 funds were distributed based on headcounts from 1992, and I think we all know that things have changed quite a bit since 1992. And now with the fair funding formula, we're taking into account things like poverty rates within school districts, local taxing effort. So we're really able to fund districts that have been historically underfunded in ways that give them the tools they need to succeed. The Level Up program is something I'm personally very proud of. $325 million going to the 100 school districts that have been most underfunded. And I think we are already seeing dividends. You're seeing schools that have been in financial watch status now finally coming out. Erie, where we're thrilled to announce a couple months ago that Erie was the first school district ever to exit a financial recovery status because of these investments that Governor Wolf has made, as well as great decision making and local leadership. So I think those 2 things are really important. You can have the best local leaders imaginable, but if they don't have the appropriate funding from the state, it's hard to do the right things, and vice versa. If you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have great local leadership, it's hard to succeed. And I think in a lot of districts like that around the state, you're seeing that progress be made.
So we're talking a lot about some great stuff that's happened over the last 8 years, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about regrets, I guess.
Yeah.
8 years, you said democracy takes time. Certainly the administration couldn't accomplish everything that they came in or that they hoped for. Disappointments, things that just didn't quite get across the finish line?
Yeah, well, I certainly think the pandemic um, was an unforeseen event that really disrupted a lot of the work that had been underway. I think folks could be forgiven if they don't remember that the governor gave a budget address a couple weeks before the pandemic really took off in America. And a few of the priorities that he laid out there are things that we did not get across the finish line that I know in talking to him are certainly things on his list that are items that we regret we weren't able to achieve. Things like the Nellie Bly Scholarship Program, which would have dedicated $200 million to students who wanted to go into college and pursue a career in really high need fields like becoming a teacher, so that we could help bolster our educator workforce by creating these pathways of free college for students going into high demand fields. Things like raising the minimum teacher salary. Currently in Pennsylvania, it's still at about $18,500, and the governor had proposed raising that to $45,000. I think full day pre-K, full day kindergarten, universal access to things like that are items that didn't get across the finish line. But as you mentioned, democracy takes time, and I hope that folks will continue to push for things like that.
You're leaving a little bit to do for the next group.
That's right. That's right.
Folks need to realize before you were the Secretary of Education, you spent many years, what I call in the front office, but still heavily involved in the education space. As you look back over your 8 years with the governor in a couple of different roles, a highlight, an accomplishment that stands out?
Well, it's been the honor of a lifetime to get to do this over the last 8 years, 8 months in this role and 6-7 years in the governor's office before this. Again, I think I'm someone who's always been dedicated to civic and public service, and it's just been an honor to play a small part in many of the things we've highlighted today, whether it be historic education funding increases, trying to set a regulatory and policy framework that gives schools the chance to succeed. I try to remind people at the Department of Education that we teach exactly 0 students every day. It's folks in schools that are doing the real work. So we've tried really hard to make sure that we're setting the conditions for success, and I think we've certainly made tremendous progress in that regard.
You mentioned 8 months in the job. Not a huge length of time, but you have been, at least from somebody that's been watching from afar and on social media and that sort of thing, you've been in a full-on sprint here, trying to, I guess, turn the lights off at the end of the administration for the department. What's left? What else, as you continue this massive sprint towards the end, what should we be watching for?
Yeah, well, we've been focused intently on our educator workforce challenges. As I mentioned, it's folks in schools that do the real work. So it's our job to make sure that they have the tools to succeed. 10 years ago, 20,000 teachers were entering the workforce every year. Last year, only 6,000 did. So it's been a top priority for us to make sure that we're building a pipeline of teachers, because those are really some of the things that we can impact at the state level. But I also think I've been focused really intently on trying to change some of the culture around the State Department of Education so that folks understand that we are here to serve schools, not the other way around, and trying to instill more of a culture of customer service. And we'll keep working on that until the end of the Wolf administration. And I hope, I'm certainly optimistic that Governor-elect Shapiro is going to do great things and the department's set up for success.
Before I let you go, let me put you on the spot. The next Secretary of Education comes in at the beginning of the Shapiro administration. We'll take this video down, we'll play it for them. What advice would you have for your successor?
That's a great question. I think listening to the people in the field is the most important takeaway. And I think leadership in education is about relationships, and it's about listening. And one of the things I've certainly benefited from are having discussions like this with folks like you who are the experts, meeting with superintendents, meeting with students, because in Harrisburg, you can tend to find yourself in a bubble. And isolated in silos in state government. And it's really important to listen to folks on the front lines doing the real work. So I would encourage them to get out into communities like I've been doing, because that's really how you learn what needs to be done. All of the accomplishments that I might tick off my list that I'm proud of are not things that were my idea. They were things that were the ideas of people I met with in schools. So I would just encourage the next secretary to be intentional about making sure that you stay connected to folks on the front line, and I'm confident they will.
Great advice. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Great honor to be able to work with you over the last several months, Mr. Secretary.
The honor's mine. Thank you.